Ms. Fitzpatrick?
Yes.
State your name and please give us your testimony, please, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Claire Fitzpatrick. I'm here speaking for two Louisianans who couldn't make it, the nature of the scheduling. The first is Naomi Yavna, a professor at Loyola University teaching Holocaust studies, and Jackie Stern, a New Orleans native where she is raising her five daughters with her husband. She serves on the board of many Jewish nonprofits, including the Jewish Federation of Greater New Orleans, the JCC, and the Jewish Children's Regional Service. I gave y'all a copy of the article that was released today, with the same content. This week, the Louisiana legislature has taken up House Bill 6, which will allow for the use of nitrogen gas in the execution of death row inmates. As Jewish citizens of Louisiana, we find the use of any form of gas for state executions a violation of our ethical principles and of Judaism's deep commitment to innate human dignity. The Jewish legal tradition, developed over the last 2,000 years, reflects considerable skepticism about the death penalty. While there are biblical passages that appear to support capital punishment, Jewish legal principles demand that we question, analyze, and interpret those texts in determining how they should be applied. The Talmud, a primary source of Jewish law, requires an extremely high threshold that evidence must satisfy for a court to impose a death sentence. In doing so, it recognized the fallibility of human judgment, something with which we are too familiar in Louisiana, where since 1973, 12 citizens condemned to death have been exonerated. We must further acknowledge the tremendous inequity in our legal system, which privileges those with greater financial resources, education, and status, and recognize that this inequity magnifies the possibility of error in capital cases. Even for those who support the role of capital punishment in our criminal justice system, the use of gas as a form of state-sanctioned murder should be deeply troubling. In 1939, the Nazis began experimenting with poison gas, predominantly carbon monoxide, as a means to kill those deemed, in their terms, unworthy of life due to disability or mental illness. After it was decided that conducting mass shootings was too emotionally grueling for German soldiers, the Nazis began to use hermetically sealed vans that filled with gas to kill hundreds of thousands of people, mainly Jewish, Roma, or mentally ill. Finally, the Germans built mass killing centers at Auschwitz and other camps such as Sobibor, Belzec, and Treblinka, in which gas was developed to murder as many as 2,000 men, women, and children at any one time. Approximately 2.7 million people were killed by gas at these killing centers. We recognize, of course, that gassing the innocent victims of the Holocaust is quite different from executing a convicted criminal.
That's very accurate. That's the most accurate thing you said so far.
That's the most accurate thing I've said so far?
Yes. You are about to equate what we're doing here with Nazis.
Well,
and that is inappropriate and offensive to me and probably most of the people in the committee. But go ahead with your testimony.
I will. I don't think the events of the Holocaust should be something that we talk about in terms of truth. They happened. And so what I just said is not more true or less true than the information before.
And it was innocent people.
All right. At the same time, however, our faith and the faith of many others teaches us that even a murderer is created with innate human dignity, in the image of God. Without condoning their actions, we must recognize death row inmates as fellow humans, however flawed, and remember that we ourselves are called to imitate God in demonstrating compassion. It is hard to see the agony of suffocation through gas as anything other than cruel and unusual in the words of the Constitution, and a breach of the obligation of compassion that we owe to each person in this world. Even the legislators promoting House Bill 6 seem to acknowledge a problem with the machinery of execution, Tellingly, their bills include a secrecy component in which the details regarding the execution, the procurement, and the administration of drugs and their effect on the executed will be legally sealed. Anyone publicizing that information could be charged with a felony. Capital punishment without transparency is dangerous to all of us. House Bill 6 would take Louisiana down a road it should not travel.
Thank you for your testimony. Okay. Please state your name since I can't.
My name is Samantha Boswell.
I turn the witnesses off. Go ahead.
My name is Samantha Boslavich, and I'm here today as a member of the National Council of Jewish Women, that goes by NCJW, specifically the Greater New Orleans section. NCJW is the oldest Jewish women's civil rights organization working for equity and justice. NCJW strongly opposes this bill. NCJW is one of 20 Jewish organizations that makes up the Jewish Community Relations Council of the Jewish Federation of Greater New Orleans, which passed a resolution last week against the use of gassing in state executions that I have right here today. The resolution states in part that, as a community guided by ethical principles and a deep respect for human dignity, it is imperative for Jews to take a strong stance against the use of gassing in state executions. This position is rooted in our historical experiences, moral teachings, and commitment to justice. The use of lethal gas in executions not only violates fundamental human rights, but also evokes painful memories of the Holocaust, where millions of Jews and others were murdered in gas chambers. We do not suggest comparisons to the atrocities of Nazi Germany, under which millions of our relatives were murdered, many by suffocation in sealed chambers. Still, we cannot imagine it possible that Jewish communities anywhere could stand by while prisoners are executed in our names, using any variation of that mechanism. Therefore, we are resolutely united in our opposition to the expansion of capital punishment methods in Louisiana to include gassing in any form. Lastly, I am also here in my capacity as an alumna and advisory council board member of Avodah, which also strongly opposes this bill. Avodah is a Hebrew word meaning to work or worship. The organization's name stems from its work running a Jewish service corps, a year-long service program for recent college graduates to work in nonprofits and engage in Jewish community. During this year, the corps members often think of their work as worship, as working for a higher purpose. I completed the Service Corps program over 2014 and 2015. During my year of service, I had the chance to grow close to two death row exonerees, Glenn Ford and John Thompson. So I'm also here today to lift them up because they have both since passed, so cannot be here themselves to voice what I know would have been their opposition to this bill. They both spent the limited time they had free speaking about their wrongful convictions to advocate for an end to the death penalty. They too are victims of this system, Senator Morris. I am here today to honor their memories. If you plan to vote for this bill, which I strongly urge you against, I hope at the very least you will amend it to remove the gassing alternative method. Due to the current state of global affairs, when anti-Semitism is on the rise, now is not the time to gas people to death, evoking the method of extermination used by Nazi Germany to mass murder Jews. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Green?
Hello, my name is Leora Green, and I'm also an alumna of the Avodah Jewish Service Corps. I would like to read some excerpts from a piece published in Tikkun magazine in July 1997 by Rabbi Myra Seufer, spiritual advisor to John Brogdon, about her accompaniment of John on the day he was murdered by the state of Louisiana via electrocution in July 1987. I scarcely remember how we passed that afternoon. There were endless cups of coffee and candy bars from the death house's lone vending machine. John and I just talked, though I no longer recall about what. Dinner time, like a bad B movie, the moment of the condemned man's final meal. For his final meal, Brogdon asked for cracklin, cornbread, a cheeseburger, French fries, and a Coke. I mused ironically that John's choice reflected my own unhealthy penchant for greasy burgers and fries. Except for the pork-seasoned cornbread, John's last meal could have been mine. And suddenly my stomach remembered that I hadn't eaten more than a candy bar since early that morning. In an act of perverse kindness, the prison cook had made John's last meal in quantity enough to feed a man for a week. Perhaps sensing my hunger, or perhaps simply unable to consume such abundance, John offered me his unfinished French fries. I froze. I wouldn't move my hand toward those greasy potatoes. They were the food of death. For a moment, I stepped outside my person, ordering myself to take the French fry. I ate it and many more. Finally, the closing stages of the day's ritual began. John was moved to a holding cell. No longer free, with only his hands and ankles shackled, he would spend his last hours again behind bars. And then final procedures began with ritual precision. First, John exchanged his personal clothing for prison-issue garb. Next, they took John from the cell to some more private space. They shaved patches of his body hair so that the electrical connections would be securely made. They changed him into an adult diaper for the release of bodily substances that would pour forth with that first jolt of electricity. 10 minutes before midnight, we began the short walk to the electric chair. Looking on from behind a glass window, Brogdon's spiritual advisor clenched her Bible and cried. I had no idea why I'd brought a Bible. It felt like a stupid, empty prop. I clutched it anyway. I'd sworn I wouldn't cry, not with reporters watching. I cried anyway. Brogdon winced several times and was hit with 4 jolts of electricity beginning at 12:06 a.m. A minute later, the electrocution was completed. Twice a year, I am sure to remember John, on his yahrzeit, the anniversary of his death, and as a new year begins. I mourn John's life, ended in Louisiana's electric chair at the age of 25. 10 years later, now almost 40, little in our justice system seems changed. I remain a committed opponent of capital punishment that I was then, firmly grounded in a tradition that holds life's sanctity above all else. I know clearly when life's holiness has been upended by state-sanctioned murder. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Pate?
Patz.
Pat. P-A-T-Z?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Pats.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Cora Patz. I'm an active member of the Jewish community in New Orleans, and I am a current participant of the Avodah Jewish Service Corps. The Union for Reform Judaism's Religious Action Center has spoken out against capital punishment consistently since 1959, and I share this view for a few reasons. This bill seeks to use gassing as a method of execution, the same method that the Nazis used to exterminate the Jewish people. The Nazi regime sought to dehumanize their victims, and they used methods consistent with this. It's hard to feel safe in a country that would elect to use these same barbaric methods. The preservation of life is our highest value in Judaism, so much so that we have a Jewish law, Pekua Nefesh, saving a life, that holds that the preservation of human life overrides virtually any other religious rule of Judaism. With regards to the death penalty, the Torah stresses the importance of presenting completely accurate testimony in capital cases, for any mistakes or falsehoods could result in the shedding of innocent blood. People have been exonerated that have been killed on death row. Now, when someone dies in Jewish practice, we say, Baruch Dayan HaEmet. Blessed is the true judge, a reference to God. Yet when we decide when someone lives or dies, regardless of their crimes, we are taking the power out of God's hands. We are ending a life before they have the ability to atone or show signs of remorse. This bill not only risks taking an innocent life, which is a very big risk, in my opinion, but if enacted, would evoke every Jewish person's worst nightmare. A state that chooses to gas its citizens. And I do not mean any disrespect by making this comparison, but I ask you, why risk having people make the comparison to Nazi Germany. Thank you for your time.
Doesn't the Jewish state, didn't they track down the criminals, war criminals, for 50 years and then have them executed?
So
Only the witness can respond.
when I hear people describing the method of killing people by the use of gas, as a Jew, all I think of is the Holocaust. Millions and millions of people tortured to a state of complete unrecognizability where they were so dehumanized they then walked into a gas chamber. That's what I visualize, and that's all I'm here to say today.
I understand that, and I understand why Jewish people would be triggered a bit by that method, and and maybe that'll stay in the bill, maybe it won't. I don't know, but you said that you had an issue with the state, and with a state that would do that, and the state of Israel did that, rightfully so, in my opinion, and tracked down Nazi war criminals for 50 years and brought them to justice, tried them, and executed them whenever they could. I've got to go on to the next witness.
Could I just say that I wouldn't use Israel as a comparison of how to treat human beings right now? That's all. Thank you, sir.
Sure.